Treasure Planet was a 2002 animated movie from Disney that essentially was a straight-up adaptation of Robert Louis Stevenson's 1883 novel Treasure Island. Yes, the movie is a science fiction film, but ignoring the androids, cyborgs, lobstermen, flying ships, and portals, this movie is basically the exact story of Treasure Island, as far as I can tell. Granted, I have not read the complete Treasure Island, and when I did read an abridged version of the story, it was over a decade ago. So naturally, I've forgotten a great deal of what I know about the original story. The movie features the vocal talents of well-known stars like Joseph Gordon-Levitt, Martin Short, and Emma Thompson, and it is directed by Ron Clements and John Musker. Apparently, these gentlemen pitched this film at the same time they pitched the 1989 Little Mermaid film, which indicates just how long it apparently takes to get one of these animated movies completed. I saw this movie shortly after it was out on home video format, and I enjoyed it quite a bit when I saw it. Granted, I was not very much into using my brain to decide if a story was good or not. My tastes were much lower back then than they are now, if I may toot my own horn a little bit. But if I can compare this to another animated movie from Disney that I recently reviewed, Atlantis, The Lost Empire, this movie, in my humble, holds up a lot more than Atlantis. With Atlantis, I also had seen the movie shortly after it came out on home video release, and then I had not watched it again until much more recently when I reviewed it. One of my biggest issues I had with Atlantis was that most of the characters are not very well fleshed out at all, and most of the decisions that they make are wildly inconsistent and usually are only made to mold the story in the way that the creators want it to be molded. If I'm just looking at how real the characters feel to me, Treasure Planet is already light years ahead of Atlantis. Now, part of this is certainly because Treasure Planet is an adaptation. The creators of this film had over 100 years of adaptations to see how others improved or weakened the original story, and they took that opportunity to make the story according to what worked in past versions of the story and what did not. With Atlantis, they were starting from scratch, which obviously takes more work. Also, where Treasure Planet is a better movie than Atlantis is that we're not dealing with some 10 characters who are all inadequately fleshed out or are given very little personality in general. In Treasure Planet, we've got just a few core characters to deal with, and the film doesn't have any problems in giving them personalities and character arcs to go through. Sure, some characters like Captain Amelia and Dr. Doppler don't get a whole lot to do, and I will go ahead right now and say that the required romantic subplot of this movie is nothing to write home about. Amelia and Doppler basically see each other, don't like each other, and for no real reason at all they fall in love later in the movie. Probably because this is a Disney movie, and especially in Disney animated movies, the love story is kind of essential, or at least it is viewed as such by the higher-ups. But this movie doesn't make the mistake of trying to juggle some 15 characters and setting itself up for failure, like the Atlantis movie. We really only have Jim Hawkins and Long John Silver as the main characters, with characters like Doppler, Captain Amelia, and the android Ben being our less crucial secondary characters. And does this movie handle the main characters properly? I would say that yeah, it does. If you're familiar with any version of Treasure Island, you know that the basic story is that Jim Hawkins finds a father figure in the form of Long John Silver, and the big problem he has to deal with is that Silver is also a pirate seeking lost treasure and is willing to do anything to get it. In a lot of ways, the character of Long John Silver can be compared to Commander Rourke from Atlantis: The Lost Empire. In both cases, you're dealing with a man seeking priceless treasure who is seemingly an ally to the good guys and turns later in the story. There are key differences, though. With Rourke in Atlantis, the first hints we get that he is a villain come some 15 minutes after he is first introduced, which, as I said in my review of Atlantis, really undermined his big reveal as a villain in the movie. I also mentioned in my review of Atlantis that if you want to effectively pull off a face-heel turn where someone is seemingly a good guy and reveals their true colors, you really should show us that character as a good guy so that it can be a real shock when we find out that this character is pond scum. Now, let's see how Long John Silver holds up under this criticism that I leveled against Rourke. Before we ever meet Silver, Jim Hawkins meets a dying pirate, Billy Bones, who warns him to beware of the cyborg. When Jim finally is on the ship that is going in search of a planet full of treasure, he sees the ship's cook is a cyborg. Now, as Silver mentions when Jim asks him about his cybernetic parts, there are many cyborgs all across the galaxy. Although we never see any of this, I can only assume that in a futuristic setting like this, that'd be commonplace, especially if you're dealing with people who are out in the field of battle and are apt to lose their limbs and such. But as we, the audience, are not part of the movie, we can be pretty certain that if the movie felt the need to introduce this cyborg into the movie, then he will be important to the plot. After all, if Chekhov's gun is cocked at the beginning of the movie, then it must fire at some point later in the movie. And also, if you're familiar with the source material, then you know good and well that Long John Silver is the villain of the piece. But where Treasure Planet works, where Atlantis did not, is that even though we know Silver is going to turn on the good guys, we still get to know him, and he turns out to be not such a bad guy. This brings me to our other main character, Jim Hawkins, but rest assured, I'll get back to Silver momentarily. Jim Hawkins is basically the anti-Harry Potter. If you've ever read or watched Harry Potter, then you know that other than the bad guys, everyone in the world of Harry just absolutely adores him, even though he does jack crap to earn this adoration. Sure, he eventually becomes a sort of underground revolutionary to fight against the forces of evil, but this is some 6 or 7 years after we've been hearing everyone treat Harry like he's this awesome, amazing guy. So how is this the opposite of Jim Hawkins? Well, essentially everyone in this movie treats Jim like he's John Wayne Gacy or something. The worst thing we ever see Jim do is fly his little flying skateboard thing in what we are told is a no-flying zone. But everyone from his mother, Dr. Doppler, and Captain Amelia act like he should just do them all a favor and go die or something. Even when Jim is doing a good thing and taking a dying man indoors so that he can try to help him, his mother screams at him like he's just punched a baby. Now, we are told that Jim is a no-good juvenile delinquent, but this is a wonderful example where, once again, I get to quote my creative writing professor from college. Show, don't tell. I get that the movie doesn't have a whole lot of time to tell the story, and in the amount of time that it does have, it does a remarkable job of fitting what it does into the time frame that it has. But it'd be nice if we could have a little bit of a clearer idea of what Jim has done to deserve such antipathy from literally everyone that he meets. That is where the show don't tell comes in. Show me Jim being a delinquent so that I can kinda sorta understand the deplorable behavior from all of the adults in this movie. Heck, this movie doesn't even tell me why Jim is looked down on so much. It just kinda happens, but we don't know why. And that brings us back to Long John Silver. Even though we are told in advance that Silver is a cad, he is the only person in this movie who treats Jim like a basic human being. Even if Silver left the entire crew of non-pirates from the ship to die on some asteroid, because of his interactions with Jim, I'd be okay with it. Basically, Silver sees some of himself in Jim. At least, that's my interpretation of his character. When Captain Amelia tells Silver that Jim will be his responsibility, because Disney probably wouldn't be able to get away with having her throw Jim off the ship, which would have been more consistent with how everyone else treats him in this movie, we see both Jim and Silver facepalm in the same way, and this is a nice shorthand way of showing us that these two guys are two peas in a pod, and it also is a nice way of showing us that although they are similar, they can go down different paths, which they will. Not to keep beating this horse, but some of my favorite moments in this movie are when we get to see Jim and Silver hanging out. At the end of the day, just through this brief montage of moments between the two, I can actually believe that Jim would do some of the things he does later in the movie, and likewise I can believe that Silver would do what he does later on. This is, once again, leaps and bounds ahead of Atlantis: The Lost Empire, where I couldn't make heads or tails of character decisions and why they were happening. Anyway, after Jim and Dr. Doppler hire a ship to take them to the lost world of Nathaniel Flint's treasure, Jim spends some quality time with Long John Silver, which I've already talked about. Then Jim accidentally finds out that Silver is leading a band of pirates who plan to mutiny against Amelia and take all of the treasure for themselves. This doesn't remain a secret for long, as Silver knows that Jim knows, and then Jim gets away along with the wounded Captain Amelia and Dr. Doppler, while Silver and his crew begin the mutiny a little earlier than planned. They land on the planet, and the only reason the pirates, who outnumber and outgun the good guys, haven't annihilated the good guys is because neither has the map that will lead to the treasure, although the good guys know where it is. Ultimately, despite Jim's best attempts at subterfuge, the pirates take the good guys hostage, and then Jim is forced to lead them to the treasure. Now, this is where things make a little less sense. Silver has told Jim that he genuinely likes Jim, but he has to act like a hardened murderous pirate in order to keep the confidence of his crew. When Jim comes back to find the pirates waiting for him when he has the map, why is Jim kept alive? Why are any of the good guys kept alive? We know that Silver might not want to kill them, or maybe he doesn't care. This is where the movie does a decent job of kinda making you wonder. But the other pirates should be sharpening their blades in preparation. This would not be as much of a problem if we didn't have the scene less than 10 minutes earlier where the pirates were calling out Silver for being too soft. In another adaptation of Treasure Island, also from Disney, Muppet Treasure Island, when the pirates force Jim to help them find the treasure, it doesn't feel weird or forced because we didn't have a subplot of the pirates suspecting Silver's true allegiances. But here we do, so this scene doesn't quite work in the way that it did in Muppet Treasure Island. Anyway, they find the treasure and then it's all booby-trapped, and we more or less get the ending of the Goonies, where almost all of the treasure is lost, even down to a skeleton watching over the treasure when these people find it. But Silver has a chance to choose between saving the treasure or saving Jim from dying, and in a truly touching moment, Silver saves Jim. In reality, Silver is more the protagonist of this movie than Jim, if I'm being honest. I mean, Jim's whole air quotes arc is that he goes from being a juvenile delinquent to being noble and eventually a student at Starfleet, or whatever it's called in this movie. But since I didn't buy him as a juvenile delinquent in the first place, it's hard for me to buy this transition as much more than lip service. Although I guess you could say Jim's arc is that even though he has found a father figure in Long John Silver, the only person to treat him like a human being, he chooses to make his own path. It's not much, but it's alright, I guess. And the nice little cherry on top for this friendship is that Silver gives Jim a handful of treasure that he put in his pocket to help his mother rebuild the inn that Silver's pirates destroyed in search of the map at the beginning of the movie. Overall, I would say that this is a really fun, pretty fantastic movie. It's not perfect, mind you. The treatment of the protagonist is a little suspect, and the shoehorning of a love story is very suspect. But it's a fantastic adaptation of the story of Treasure Island as I know it. And it's definitely one of my favorite of Disney's animated features. If you haven't seen it in the last 11 years, I would recommend you change that. Also, if you like this video, I would recommend that you like, share, comment, and subscribe, and do all of the things that you love to do on YouTube videos. In the meantime, I'll be back tomorrow with some other kind of video. I'll see you then.